1. Introduction of World War I. World War I, also known as the Great War, was one of the most significant and destructive conflicts in modern history. It took place between July 28, 1914, and November 11, 1918, involving more than 30 nations across Europe, Asia, Africa, and other parts of the world. The war began after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914. This single event set off a chain reaction among the major powers due to a network of alliances, military rivalries, and national ambitions. Within weeks, most of Europe was at war. Two major alliances emerged: the Allied powers or Entente powers, including Britain, France, Russia, later joined by Italy 1915, and the United States 1917. The Central powers led by Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. Early dominance: the Central powers 1914 for 1916. At the start of the war, the Central powers were dominant on the battlefield. Germany, with its highly trained army and advanced weapons, won several early victories in Belgium, France, and against Russia on the Eastern Front. Austria-Hungary fought hard to maintain control in the Balkans, while the Ottoman Empire joined in 1914, strengthening the Central Alliance. For several years, the war seemed to favor the Central powers as they captured large territories and held strong defensive positions, especially along the Western Front, where trench warfare caused a deadly stalemate. Shift in power: rise of the Allied dominance 1917-1918. From 1917 onward, the balance of power began to change. Several key events turned the tide in favor of the Allied powers. 1. The entry of the United States, April 1917. America brought fresh troops, vast industrial resources, and morale to the exhausted Allies. 2. The collapse of Russia, 1917. The Russian Revolution forced Russia to leave the war, but Germany could not take full advantage due to internal exhaustion and Allied resistance in the West. 3. Economic and naval strength. The Allies controlled global trade routes and blockaded Germany, leading to severe food shortages and unrest within the Central powers. 4. Military innovation. Allied advances in tanks, aircraft, and coordinated attacks broke the stalemate on the Western Front. By late 1918, the Central powers began to collapse. The Ottoman Empire and Austria-Hungary surrendered. Germany, facing revolution at home and defeat at the front, signed an armistice on November 11, 1918, ending the war. Outcome and legacy. The Allied powers emerged as dominant and victorious. The war caused the downfall of major empires: German, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian, and redrew the political map of Europe and the Middle East. The Treaty of Versailles 1919 placed heavy blame and reparations on Germany, setting the stage for political and economic tensions that would later lead to World War II. 2. Causes of World War I. World War I was caused by a mix of political tensions, military buildup, and national rivalries that had been growing for years. The immediate spark was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, but deeper causes lay in the complex web of alliances, militarism, and nationalism that dominated early 20th century Europe. 1. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated in Sarajevo by Gavrilo Princip, a member of a Serbian nationalist group. This single act set off a chain reaction. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia and declared war. Russia supported Serbia. Germany backed Austria-Hungary. France and Britain were drawn in through their alliances. Within weeks, Europe was engulfed in a full-scale war. 2. Alliances and rivalries in Europe. Before 1914, Europe was divided into two powerful alliance systems: Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Triple Entente: Britain, France, and Russia. These alliances were meant to provide security, but instead they created a fragile balance of power. Any conflict involving one country risked dragging all of Europe into war. Intense rivalries, especially between Germany and Britain over naval power, and France and Germany over territory, increased the tension even more. 3. Militarism and nationalism. European nations glorified military strength and were locked in an arms race. Countries believed that possessing large armies and powerful weapons made them stronger and more respected. At the same time, nationalism, strong pride and loyalty toward one's nation was rising across Europe. It fueled both competition between major powers and independence movements among smaller ethnic groups, particularly in the Balkans, where Slavic nations sought freedom from empires. These causes combined to make Europe a powder keg, ready to explode. When Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, that spark ignited one of the most devastating wars in history. 3. Major powers and alliances. When World War I began in 1914, the nations of Europe were already bound together by a series of alliances. These alliances divided the continent into two major groups, the Allies and the Central Powers. What began as a regional conflict soon grew into a global war, as more countries joined each side. 1. The Allies. Allied powers. The Allies were a coalition of nations united against the Central Powers. Their goal was to stop aggression, defend smaller nations, and maintain the balance of power in Europe. Main members: Britain, United Kingdom, a powerful empire with a strong navy that played a key role in blockading Germany. France fought fiercely to defend its territory, especially after Germany invaded through Belgium. Russia supported Serbia and fought on the Eastern Front against Germany and Austria-Hungary. Italy, initially part of the Triple Alliance, but switched sides in 1915 to join the Allies. United States entered the war in 1917, bringing fresh troops and resources that helped tip the balance toward victory. Japan joined the Allies early in the war and captured German colonies in the Pacific. Other supporting countries included Belgium, Serbia, Greece, Romania, and Portugal. 2. The Central Powers. The Central Powers were the nations that fought against the Allies. They were located mainly in the center of Europe, which gave them strategic military advantages at first. Main members: Germany, the most powerful member, with advanced industry, strong military leadership, and a plan for rapid victory, the Schlieffen Plan. Austria-Hungary started the conflict by declaring war on Serbia after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Ottoman Empire. Turkey joined in late 1914, controlling vital trade routes between Europe and Asia. Bulgaria entered in 1915, hoping to gain territory in the Balkans. These nations cooperated closely but eventually suffered from economic hardship, military exhaustion, and internal unrest, leading to their defeat in 1918. 4. Key battles and fronts. The Western Front. The Western Front stretched from the North Sea to Switzerland and became the main theater of war. It was defined by trench warfare, with both sides locked in a deadly stalemate. Major battles like Verdun and the Somme symbolized the immense human cost of the conflict. The Eastern Front. On the Eastern Front, fighting was more mobile and stretched across vast distances between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia. And like the Western Front, there were fewer trenches, and rapid movements led to large casualties and shifting territorial lines. The Gallipoli campaign, fought in 1915 to 1916. The Gallipoli campaign was an Allied attempt to control the Dardanelles Strait and open a supply route to Russia. The campaign ended in failure for the Allies, with heavy losses among British, French, Australian, and New Zealand troops. Anzac, Verdun, and the Somme. Two of the most brutal battles of the war took place in France in 1916. Battle of Verdun lasted nearly 10 months, symbolizing French determination with the phrase "they shall not pass." Battle of the Somme, intended to relieve pressure on Verdun. It became infamous for its massive casualties, including nearly 60,000 British soldiers on the first day alone. 5. Life in the trenches. Daily routines and hardships. Life in the trenches was harsh and exhausting. Soldiers spent weeks or even months living in muddy, cramped conditions with little rest. Their daily routine involved standing guard, repairing trenches, fetching supplies, and waiting for attacks. Constant shell fire and fear of sudden assaults made sleep and peace rare. Food was often limited to tinned meat, stale bread, and tea, and clean water was scarce. Letters from home provided the only comfort amid the chaos. Disease and survival. The insanitary conditions led to outbreaks of disease. Trench foot, caused by standing in cold, wet mud for long periods, could lead to infection and even amputation. Lice and rats were everywhere, spreading illness and contaminating food. Shell shock, now known as PTSD, affected many soldiers due to the constant bombardment and trauma of battle. Despite these hardships, soldiers developed strong bonds of camaraderie and endurance, helping each other survive the horrors of trench life. 6. Technological innovations in WW1. Tanks, aircraft, and chemical weapons. World War I introduced a new era of warfare through rapid technological innovation. Tanks were first used by the British in 1916 at the Battle of the Somme, designed to cross trenches and barbed wire. They changed the nature of ground combat. The early models were slow and unreliable. Aircraft played an increasingly important role, evolving from simple reconnaissance planes to fighters and bombers. Aerial dogfights became a dramatic symbol of the war's new dimension. Chemical weapons, including chlorine and mustard gas, were introduced as terrifying new tools of war. These gases caused blindness, burns, and death, leaving a lasting mark on both soldiers and international law. Communication and medical advances. Communication technologies advanced rapidly to meet the demands of large-scale warfare. Field telephones, signal flares, and coded radio messages allowed better coordination between units. Carrier pigeons were also used to deliver critical messages when lines were cut. In medicine, doctors and nurses developed new ways to treat wounds, infections, and shock. The widespread use of antiseptics, blood transfusions, and prosthetics saved countless lives and laid the foundation for modern battlefield medicine. 7. The end of the war and the aftermath. As the final months of World War I approached in 1918, exhaustion had spread across all nations. Germany's allies Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria were collapsing one by one. Inside Germany, protests filled the streets. Soldiers refused to fight, and hunger haunted the people. On November 11, 1918, Germany finally signed the armistice, ending the fighting. Across Europe, church bells rang, and soldiers on both sides breathed a sigh of relief, for the Great War was over. But peace did not come easily. The Treaty of Versailles 1919 placed heavy blame and punishment on Germany. It had to give up territories, pay massive reparations, and limit its army. The treaty left deep resentment among the German people, anger that would later give rise to Adolf Hitler and another world war. Europe was left in ruins, millions dead, economies shattered, and empires, like the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman, had gone forever. The world had changed forever, and though the guns had fallen silent, the seeds of future conflict were already planted. 8. The end of World War I. The final phase. By 1918, both sides were exhausted after 4 years of intense fighting. The entry of the United States in 1917 gave the Allies a major advantage in manpower and resources. Germany launched one last attack, the Spring Offensive, hoping to win before American forces arrived in full strength. However, the offensive failed, and the Allies counterattacked with the 100 Days Offensive, pushing German troops back toward their borders. The armistice. Facing food shortages, civilian unrest, and military collapse, Germany requested peace. On November 11, 1918, an armistice ceasefire was signed in a railway carriage in France. The fighting stopped at 11 a.m., marking the official end of World War I. Soldiers and civilians across Europe celebrated the long-awaited peace. The aftermath. After the war, world leaders met to shape the peace at the Paris Peace Conference 1919. The Treaty of Versailles placed heavy penalties on Germany, including territorial losses and large reparations. 4 major empires, like German, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian, collapsed, reshaping the map of Europe and the Middle East. Though peace was restored, the harsh terms and unresolved tensions would later contribute to the outbreak of World War II. 9. Social and economic impact. The human cost. Over 16 million deaths, soldiers and civilians combined. Millions more wounded, disabled, or psychologically affected. Shell shock. Lost generation, massive population decline, and emotional trauma in Europe. Families and communities devastated by loss and separation. Political changes and revolutions. Collapse of empires, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, German, and Russian. Rise of new nations and redrawn borders in Europe and the Middle East. Russian Revolution 1917, leading to the formation of the Soviet Union. Growing demand for democracy, independence, and social reforms across colonies. Economic hardship fueling political instability and extremist movements. For example, rise of fascism and communism. 10. Legacy and lessons of World War I. Political and social changes. World War I reshaped the global order. The collapse of empires led to the rise of new nations in Europe and the Middle East. In Russia, the hardships of war sparked the 1917 revolution, bringing the Soviet Union into existence. The role of women also changed dramatically, with millions of men at the front. Women entered factories, offices, and hospitals, paving the way for future movements toward gender equality and voting rights. Cultural and psychological impact. The war left deep scars on society. The sheer loss of life and destruction led to widespread disillusionment. Writers, poets, and artists expressed the trauma and futility of war in works that defined a generation. The so-called lost generation, memorials, and remembrance traditions, such as Armistice Day and the poppy symbol, were created to honor those who served and died. Lessons learned. World War I taught the world hard lessons about nationalism, militarism, and the dangers of rigid alliances. Though the hope was that it would be the war to end all wars, unresolved tensions and harsh peace terms eventually contributed to the outbreak of World War II. Still, the conflict prompted the creation of the League of Nations, an early effort to promote diplomacy and prevent future wars.